We're at the top of the hour and we're back on the SportsMax Zone. We're going to talk some track and field now because the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association have revised their selection policy specifically for this summer's Paris Olympic Games. According to the J3As, the move is to bring the policy in line with restrictions imposed by World Athletics and the International Olympic Committee, the IOC. They also say they'll have a further review of the policy in September. That's, of course, after the Olympics. The most noticeable change surrounds athlete selection for relay teams. And here's a look at the previous criteria compared to the one that now exists. Before Paris 2024, athletes placing in the first 4 positions in the 100 and 400 meters would be named to the relay pool. The remaining members of the relay pool would be selected by the J3A selection committee. Now, the current selection criteria says athletes placing in the first 3 positions in the 100 and 400 will be named to the relay pool. The remaining members of the relay pool will be selected by the J3A selection committee. Now, along with the reiterating guidelines around applying for medical exemptions, the J3A has also highlighted that only a maximum of 5 non-automatic qualifiers or quota athletes will be selected. This is what that policy says. A, the development goals for the J3 across many disciplines. B, the world ranking of the individual. C, prior performance of the athletes involved. D, the development stage of the athletes. And E, based on the final placing of the athletes at the national championship. The national champion in their event may be given greater consideration. This is the selection of athletes who qualify via the quota system, entirely at the discretion of the J3As. If quota athletes are selected, it will be up to a maximum of 5 and based on criteria which will include the listings that I just presented. Now, high jumpers Romaine Beckford, Kimberly Williamson and the hammer thrower Nayoka Clunis benefited from the quota selections at last year's World Championships, and the J3 is here making some rulings, Mariah and Ricardo, which we had anticipated or projected, because given what had happened last year coming out of the Budapest experience, there was the general feeling that the J3s had to put something more definitive and more clarifying with regard to the selection policies, because there were some gray areas that needed to be addressed. Ricardo, you've been following this story closely. Do you think these new adjustments address that?
The short answer is no. The short answer really is no. So let me start, Lance and Mariah, by first of all commending the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association for getting this revised policy out there in time so that we and the athletes can examine and just have a close look at what is happening here. So the first, and as we pointed out, the most notable change being with the relays, that I have no issues with, and here is why. So at the World Championships, the governing body allows for 6, and we've seen in the past as well, 8 athletes to be in a relay pool.
Yeah.
And so the previous selection policy will cover that, because the previous selection policy says top 4 from the trials at 100 and 400, and the remaining members are selected by the panel, the selection committee. In this case, for the Olympic Games, you only have 5 athletes per relay pool. So there's a reduction of 1. There was that issue that popped up at the Tokyo Olympic Games as well, where Jamaica at one stage were fearful that they would not have a women's 4x100 team in the preliminaries. And then Sharika Jackson didn't make the 200 final, and that solved all the issues. Make the 200 semifinals, sorry. She made that mistake and didn't get out of qualifying, and that solved all the issues. So there are only 5 athletes per relay pool for the Olympic Games, and that explains the change to say that it will be 3 from the trials, the top 3, and then the others will be
So it was a forced change then, and not necessarily a change that they on their own decided to go to.
Yeah, and I would say a sensible one as well, Lance, because I can completely understand the governing body wanting the flexibility to pick some members of the relay pool. Let's bear in mind as well that the World Athletics and the International Olympic Committee say that those who are contesting the individual 100 and 400 meters must be part of the relay pool. So the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association has to pick the top 3 from the 100 and the 400 meters. They have absolutely no choice. Those athletes have to be in the relay pool. So I just wanted to clarify that as the number one thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of making the policy overall a lot clearer, Lance and Mariah, I don't think it has.
And what are some of the gray areas you think?
So one, it does not address how athletes are to be selected for the mixed relays. So we know that the top 3 from the 100 and the top 3 from the 400 will be selected for the 4x1 and the 4x400. But based on this policy, unless I am missing something, it does not say how you get selected as part of the mixed 4x4 contingent. Now, that for me is problematic. That is one of the areas I was looking forward to any new policy clearing up, explicitly saying that this is how it happens. And what I expected was that the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association would say, we will take the top 3 once available. Maybe as part of entry, you would need to state whether if you are in the top 3 of the 400 meters, that you would also be available for the mixed relay or whatever the case might be. And so from the governing body sits down and has that conversation, they have an idea of what is happening there. But I think there needs to be some part of the policy that deals specifically with the mixed 4x4 and how athletes make that team. That doesn't exist in this policy.
Yeah, and coming out of the relays, the world relays that we saw in the Bahamas recently, that by itself, with regard to how the coaching staff addresses it, had a lot of questions as well. It was almost as if athletes wanted to run, they could, and athletes focusing on you know their individual events or programming on their individual events, almost appearing to feel as if this mixed relay thing is just getting in their way.
Yeah, very much the case. And listen, I mean, the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association could say, well, we will pick the best available athletes at the time, whatever the case, but I think there has to be something that speaks to how athletes get onto the mixed relay team. The other thing that stood out to me looking at this new policy is that the medical exemption. So
yeah, I have a problem with that.
Yeah, so the medical exemption has been around for quite a while, Lance and Mariah. Part of the issue is that it has been implemented in different ways. And again, I expected this policy to address what has been the most significant issue around the medical exemption. So that rule says that to get a medical exemption, you have to be ranked in the top 3. But it doesn't say when you should be ranked in the top 3. Should it be at the time of the national trials? Should it be at the end of the 2023 season? Should it be at the start of June? And here is why that is so significant. Let me give you a real-time example, Lance and Mariah. So let's take Wayne Pinnock in the men's long jump. He is the World Championship silver medalist. At the end of 2023, he was ranked number 3 in the world. So the last ranking, which came out on the 26th of December 2023, he was ranked number 3 in the world.
Even though he was world lead.
At the time, and World Championship silver medalist as well.
Yeah.
At this stage, on the 6th of June 2024, Wayne Pinnock is ranked number 4 in the world.
Oh.
So he could go into the national championships. At the start of the national championships, he could be outside the top 3, even though in the last 8 months, he has spent a lot of time in the top 3. So when is this top 3?
But it compounds the problem too, because isn't he the current world leader?
He is the current world leader. So if he got a niggle
Yes.
tomorrow
Yes.
that prevents him from competing at the national championships, but he could be back in shape for the Olympics. And we are speaking theoretically here. Because he's currently not in the top 3,
Yes.
then he wouldn't be eligible for a medical exemption. But if the rule says that it is at the end of December 2023, it's at the end of the 2023 season, he would be eligible for a medical exemption. So that is why it is so important. Here's another quick example that is not as good as the Wayne Pinnock example, but it's still a pretty decent example. Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce spent a lot of time ranked in the top 3 in the world in 2023. She is currently ranked number 7 in the world. Depending on when you say the medical exemption.
You just said that this is not as strong as an example as the Wayne Pinnock, but in some people's eyes it would even be stronger.
Yeah,
We're talking about Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce.
The reason I say it is not as strong, right, is because Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce ended 2023 as number 4 in the world.
Okay.
But she was top 3 for a lot of 2023. So again, it all depends on when you decide that this top 3 is supposed to be. Is it an accumulated ranking, meaning if you have spent this number of weeks in the top 3 over the last 6 or 7 months or over the last year, then you are eligible? Or is there a time frame? It has to be end of December 2023, or it has to be current now leading into the national championships. That has to be clarified, and I am extremely disappointed that this policy has not dealt with that specifically.
And one of the things I also found when reading the policy is the use of the word, the J3A is discretion, Ricardo.
Dear Lord.
And I'd like to also hear your take on that, because I feel like it just leaves, so there are areas that, you know, you just want to leave for open interpretation, which is something that I think this policy is supposed to address. And there were a couple of times that that term popped up, which means, all right, so the J3As will decide in this situation based on their discretion. And to me, that is a term that doesn't really sit or doesn't do any checks and balances for me.
The most striking example of that for me, Mariah, has to do with the policy on quota athletes.
Yeah, I singled that one out.
And if we could bring up that graphic again, where the J3A says that selection of quota athletes is at their discretion. So here it is, selection of athletes who qualify via quota is entirely the discretion of the J3As. If quota athletes are selected, it will be up to a maximum of 5, and based on criteria which will include the following, and Lance went through those bullet points earlier on. But here's the issue I have, Lance and Mariah. First of all, athletes who qualify by quota have qualified. There are 2 ways to qualify for global events. One is to make the automatic qualifying standard. 2 is to qualify by world ranking, which is the quota places.
Yes.
What the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association is saying to me is, well, we don't really care if you qualify by the secondary method. You're only automatic if you qualify by the first method. I have a problem with that. It's like saying to me, well, to qualify for the FIFA World Cup, you either finish in the top 3 in CONCACAF, or if you're 4th or 5th, you have to go through playoffs. And the JFF goes, well, if we're not in the top 3, we're not going through the playoff system. Listen, that might sound like a drastic example, but that's the way I view it with these athletes. Let me explain the genesis of the qualifying system. First of all, the standards are ridiculously challenging for athletes, especially field event athletes. Part of why that is the case is because World Athletics, the governing body for track and field, does not want more than the stipulated quota of athletes to qualify automatically. So, for example, they say 32 athletes per field event. They set the standard at a point that they ensure that more than 32 persons will not meet that.
Yes.
That's the whole aim. The aim is to ensure that they don't surpass the specific number that they want to compete at their global championship. And therefore, it is accepted that a lot of the athletes who get to the World Championships or the Olympic Games in these events will not get the automatic standard. The other thing to bear in mind, especially for field events as well, venues matter. Where you play matter. We're seeing that in the T20 World Cup now. The differences in the pitch surfaces in New York versus Dallas versus Kensington Oval in Barbados. Track and field is no different. You look, there are several venues across the United States of America where athletes go and produce remarkable times and distances. And there are other places...
Not so much so.
Not so much so because well, I don't want to say the quality of the venue, but there are several factors that determine how well you perform at a venue, including the weather, the wind conditions, all of that. So if you're getting more favorable conditions where you are able to compete, and I am not getting great conditions, I may not make the automatic qualifying standard. Another example, quickly, Lance and Mariah, Frederick Dakers, the 2019 World Championship silver medalist, who has been doing very well on the circuit, but he hasn't made the standard for the world champion, for the Olympic Games yet, which is 67.20 meters. But he consistently beats a lot of the men who have already made the standard. Because head-to-head is completely different in a lot of these events from you just going to a place that is good for the event that you're doing.
And Mariah mentioned about the discretion term, and I saw an instance of that too in the Quota guidelines that we just saw. The last line about national champion. A national champion may be given greater consideration. And I'm just saying, may gives them an out if they decide not to use the national champion. And that is a discretionary position that they have taken, which doesn't bind them into following what the rules say, because they say it may give them greater consideration.
What the J3 has said to me with that specific policy is that whatever we do is right. Whoever we want to pick in the moment is right. We won't pick more than 5 athletes who have qualified via the quota system, which I think is wrong. Lance and Mariah, I think athletes work so hard just to try and meet these standards and qualify for global events. It shouldn't be that when they do qualify, regardless of how they qualify, that they are not given the opportunities to represent their country on the global stage. So I have a massive problem with that, and I think that's something the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association should fix. I think at the start of the season, the J3A should say, given the number of events we have in track and field, multiply that by 3. That's the number of athletes that we can get there, and they should put that money aside that every single athlete who qualifies for a global event gets the opportunity to go. It's unfair to the athletes that they work so hard and put in so much, and when they qualify, whether it be automatic or by world ranking, that they are not given the opportunity, and that their national association will say, well, we're only taking 5 of you. In my opinion, it's not right, and it's unfair to the athletes.
Break time?
We're going to take a...